All right, well, since I was the most excited, I guess I'll start this off. First, thanks for coming at 3:30 in the afternoon when you've been in meetings since 8:30 this morning. Gold stars for all of you. I give out gold stars all semester. They don't mean anything and you don't get anything for them, but you should feel pretty honored that you got one of them. So, my name is Megan Bomer. I'm full-time math faculty. I adopted my first OER in the spring of 2018.
I'm James Decker, full-time humanities faculty.
I'm Jessica Bastian. I'm the Digital Services Librarian here at ICC.
Cate Kaufman, Library Services Director.
So you got two cards when you came in that have two questions on them. So I said ponder a little bit on those as you guys were coming in. So let's, we'll start with the first one of how do you define OER was the first question. Jessica's got some extras if you need it. You can jot some thoughts down if you would like, but we'd like just you to share some ideas. So someone said to you, how do you define OER? What would you say?
I don't know what I've been heard of it before I saw your table out in the
Okay, so not quite sure on how to define it. That's a good starting point. We're glad you're here today, though.
Okay.
Well, it's open, not online education.
There was some confusion this morning. It does, so technically, open educational resources.
Yeah, so obviously the educational resource refers to textbook or things along supplemental materials along that line, and then the open, I think, is probably where we have maybe the most confusion about the definition of that term. Is it necessarily free? Is it reduced cost? Is it what? That's, I think, where I'm confused.
Do you guys, that's probably a pretty common kind of thing. Does anyone have a definition for open?
I mean, I could probably define the word, but
Right. So as it pertains to open educational resources, Dan mentioned, like, is it about how much it costs? And actually, no, not at all. So open refers to the license, so how the material is published. So something that's closed has a copyright, right? So your textbook is considered, it's copyrighted material. So in this context, as we move forward and we talk about open, we're referring to the license that's on the material. So an open item is going to have a Creative Commons license on it, which allows you to use it, maybe remix it, revise it, and we'll kind of, I don't know that we actually cover the definition, which is why I thought it might be a good idea. Yes. Oh, okay, so I'm moving ahead.
Does anyone have a different definition? I know some of you have been using them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, ideally, like, no textbook. Like, I would like to go completely away from a textbook and using just, we said open not necessarily mean, online, but, online resources, different types of resources, all those materials that are out there in the world, and use that to provide the information and materials that we use in the classroom.
Not one single book,
No,
but
not
pulling
one
a lot of
single book.
resources
Yeah,
together
yeah.
that represent the content that you need.
So it's open in the same sense that Open Office that I can use on my Mac is as opposed to Microsoft.
Yes. Yep, that's a good,
That's a good
analogy right there. How about our other one? So you showed up here this afternoon at 3:30 in the afternoon, which says something. So maybe it's a little bit of a leading question. So why are you considering OER? What brought you here today? What are you intrigued about? Could be that I told you you had to come. There's only a few of you at that boat. So what do you think? What would you say?
I'll volunteer. I teach a humanities class with a fellow colleague, and we have not found a satisfactory textbook that fulfills what we want in terms of course content, and also textbooks that are factually accurate. We have come across a number of textbooks with inaccuracies.
Yeah, they're still expensive
And they're
despite
still
these
expensive.
shortcomings, right?
So, unsatisfactory materials.
And you're not alone there.
Chris, what do you think?
I came because I've been using it for a year. I wanted to share sort of what I've learned and find out what you guys learned at your recent ATD thing. So I want to know where we are. Going. Yeah.
I think the concept of a textbook is like outdated. I think the whole idea of textbook, it's like, it's so static. And I would like I like my classes, which, they are, but I'm still relying on these textbooks. And I would like it to be much more dynamic. I think it's gonna be more dynamic, so I'm kind of tired of the static textbook.
Especially depending on the fields. that
Right,
you're in,
I mean,
right?
it's just like this info content dump.
So
in
there's
some of these-
the algebra and calculus.
Well, right. In
Right,
my
so-
class.
But in a lot of areas.
You know, I mean, we don't need, I mean, my colleagues might disagree with me, you know, in my discipline, but I think it's just kind of the mode is outdated for some things.
John, what were you thinking?
Well, just in terms of textbooks, we usually get a new textbook every 3 to 4 years, and updates are made, new colors, maybe a couple new problems. Not a whole lot of change, so they can buy a whole new textbook every 3 or 4 years for not a lot of change in content. So with the open, you can actually maybe have this published every year instead of every 2 or 3 years. So updates are more possible and more real time.
And control over those updates, right? So we're deciding what to update and when and.
Yeah. Does anyone use a textbook and not cover every single chapter, every single problem?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right? So that's another part of the OER experience, is that you can customize it. So if you don't see the book, you can add, like Megan has done, from this one and from this one, and create your own custom book.
I do want to put cost up there. I
Oh,
think it
absolutely.
is, it's not there yet, and it is the reason I started.
It's the reason
I
I
came back from
started.
achieving the dream and I felt guilty.
Yes, I did.
Guilt.
It is the reason I started looking into it as well.
Kind of a good segue.
Yeah, so let's put up,
Do you want to explain about the beyond cost theme?
Yeah.
Yeah.
that, so, I think for a lot of us, cost is kind of the obvious reason to start talking about something open, right? That we see these textbooks our students are buying, we see the price tags, and we know that for a lot of students, that's a pretty big barrier to them being able to really engage in our class, that they're either not buying texts that they need, they're getting them late because they're waiting on financial aid, so they're 2 weeks behind in getting materials, or they're having to give things up that are important in life to be able to buy that book. You know, they're having trouble with gas and groceries and rent, but they're spending $200 on an algebra book instead. That sometimes feels a little bit off. And so I know for me personally, I started kind of my OER journey about 2 years ago, and I started just because of cost. I was frustrated with the publisher and what it cost for my students to buy the access code, and then I was having technology issues on top of it. So they were paying a lot of money and we were having issues. And I was like, this is not a good use of my students' money. And so that kind of sent me down the journey of looking at it. And so for me, it started with cost, and it became beyond cost when I realized how much I could customize the content for my course when I switched over to OER. So the publisher is never going to let me edit their textbooks, right? They've spent a lot of money putting this book together, and this is what the book is going to be. But now I'm able to look at my courses and say, okay, let's really take a look at our course learning outcomes. Where do we want those to be? And then let's build the material that focuses directly on that. And so now I can customize my books so that they match exactly what it is we're trying to accomplish with our course. It goes in the order that I want to cover things. It doesn't have the sections that I don't want to use. It has the notation and the vocabulary that I want to have in there, all at no cost to my students. And so after 2 years, even though I started with cost, if Pearson came to me today and offered me all of their materials for free, I wouldn't go back at this point to those publisher materials. So it didn't start there, but I think once we realize the potential with these open educational resources, that yes, for students, they care about the cost, right? That's really all they want to know. I think as teachers, we start to realize that this gives us the control over our classrooms, that we had started to give some of that control over to the publishers and what they were putting in that books and how they were ordering it and structuring it, and now we've got that control to really build the resources that do exactly what we want to do.
So I think, some of what we're going to share today is built off of our experience at the ATD conference in Minneapolis at the end of May. And the three of us, Megan was not able to join us, but the three of us, we were on the OER track at that conference. And so I think we all kind of went in with that it's all about the cost kind of perception, and came away with more of Megan's point of view, that it's much more than that. And so during that whole process, that 3-day process of working with the folks at ATD, hearing the speakers, and working as a team. We developed a mission or a vision and some plans to go along with that to try to move the ball forward here at ICC. So this right here is a product of our time there, and we'll let you read that for yourself, but we did a lot of wordsmithing, and this is where we landed. Does anybody want to speak to that vision?
Sure, and the vision was based on not only what we learned, but some of the resources that we studied over the weekend. This is also borne out by other research we'll talk about in the future, but that idea of student persistence and completion. You think, okay, it's cost, it's cheap, it makes sense, they've got a free book or a very low-cost book, but the research has shown that because, and I think Megan mentioned this, they have the book on the very first day. And this is becoming more and more of an issue. Even if they've got the money to buy it, they want to see if you're going to use it, right? They're going to see if they can skate by with the old edition. All that goes away with OER. They come, they have it the first day of class. And that you can't imagine, well, I think you can imagine, how that helps with persistence, because you know, as an instructor, you're going to have an assignment. And if they don't have the book to do the reading, to help prepare them for that assignment, they're probably not going to do very well on that assignment. They'll get frustrated, they'll perhaps get an F on their assignment, and out they go. This has reduced the numbers of D's, F's, and W's as well, so also helping with the persistence and completion. In terms of equity, obviously, free.
And so I think when putting together the vision, what we wanted to consider were both of those perspectives. So the first bullet point addresses the issues of equity, that cost piece, meeting student success kind of goals. And then the second piece is really more about the pedagogy, right? How using an OER can empower faculty. It's about academic freedom, collaborative curriculum design, and really just moving the ball forward and kind of looking at your classroom in a different way. So this is the definition that we are, not just our small group, but the textbook committee here at ICC, Textbook Advisory Committee, has adopted as sort of our definition of what an OER means here at ICC. It's based on the Hewlett Foundation's kind of general definition, and it's the one that's probably most cited in the literature, and so we took it. So open educational resources can be broadly defined as teaching and learning research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, that reside in the public domain or have been released under an open license that permits no-cost access, use, adaptation, and redistribution by others with or no limited restrictions. So that's kind of, sort of our go-to definition. And so one of the things that I learned at ATD, which I'm having a hard time breaking, but one of the things I said is don't talk about the license, but as a librarian, I just have to, because I think that's the really cool part. But our definition kind of talks about, it talks about the open license, and then really what you can do with that open license. That's what really makes, I think, OERs fun and engaging for faculty and for students.
I want to jump in on the definition and the terminology OER. We're really going to use that sort of in-house among the faculty and staff, because students are going to see that and say, what is that? We're going to use different terminology. We've been discussing some of it, free or low cost or no cost, variations of that. So on the student-facing side of things, they're not going to see that. Because that's just going to confuse. But when they see free or low cost,
So we'll bring bookstore websites,
Yeah.
class schedule, some of those types of things that there will start to be easily searchable for students, that they could search the class schedule for books for classes that have no cost materials or low cost under some kind of threshold, maybe $40, something like that. that all the materials are below that. But we feel like OER for them, they don't really care about the licensing, right? Like they just want, how much does this cost me? And so for the students, we'll have some simpler terminology, but for us as faculty and staff, like we want to be able to talk about like what does this really mean to have an open educational resource? So it'll be a little more internal.
Of that $40, we're just talking about what used to be the textbook. So we're not talking about graphing calculators, we're not talking about uniforms, we're not talking about art materials, not that, we're just talking about your text type materials.
In the literature, you might run across it. So several schools have adopted what they call Z degree programs. So Z standing for zero, like zero cost degree programs. And at ATD, what was inspiring was seeing some of the community colleges that had built out complete programs, complete gen eds, that were all these Z degree pathways, right? So a student could come into a community college and take an entire pathway without ever having to buy a textbook. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. And so, you know, like you do at ATD, you get excited. And so when we were putting together the vision and like kind of thinking about the definition, I think we'll move to goals next. This was the environment that we were in, like with these schools that just had already done just an incredible amount of work, and we're really excited.
So prior to us going to ATD, there had been a draft of the institutional operational plan for this year already provided, and we knew OER was on there. We weren't entirely sure of the specifics, but we kind of tried to guide our goals around what we thought that was going to look like. So that's why you'll see the top two say IOP after them. I think those have changed slightly. They might not have those specific dates on them anymore, but we tried to just self-impose some deadlines so that we could keep things rolling, because what we're looking at is pretty big. I mean, this touches all areas of the college, and so it's going to be a heavy lift to try to do all of this. But those top two specifically, that's what essentially we're responsible for to the Board of Trustees for the coming year. So
The bottom three are the fun ones.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
So these are sort of the kind of
must-dos.
must-dos, so forth. But looking at courses that have a lot of sections, or perhaps that have very high textbook costs, and try to target those classes. Not to say we're going to come to you and say you must change. Not that, but just to say there is an opportunity. And this bullet point on teaching and learning benefits, open pedagogy, which Jessica alluded to, is very exciting. And so it's sort of the pedagogical equivalent of the OER text. In that rather than just having the old assignment where they would complete it, you'd grade it, and it would never be seen from again, to remix, revise, reuse these assignments from perhaps semester to semester, perhaps course to course. So not just in the intro psych, but the intro psych would talk to a 200 level psych class. And also hit the community. We listened to a speaker who was very dynamic and showing this is not just an academic exercise in your class, but perhaps you have some kind of healthcare related assignment, and now the public can see it, right? That doesn't mean there aren't mistakes in it, but because it's an OER type open pedagogy assignment, other people, other students will then fix those mistakes as we go on, and it gets better and better, and it's much more dynamic.
And the idea is engaging to the student, right? So you're giving students tangible evidence of their work and what they learn. And even if it's course to course, it's a progression. So kind of like a portfolio model, but actually having assignments that that last and that stay and that a student can point to and kind of take ownership over it and have in the online environment, the digital environment. So it's really exciting.
questions or thoughts or things?
With the last bullet point,
Yeah.
maybe did you want to talk
Professional
about that?
development. We understand that this type of stuff is hard to do alone. It takes a lot to make some of these big changes. Like it's a big mental shift as faculty from the way that we learned as students and maybe how we've been teaching for a lot of years. And so this idea of this a little bit more fluid curriculum and things like that that can change, that continuous improvement and things like that is not something any of us can do alone. And so it's a big part of the reason that this sub-team is made up of faculty and librarians teamed together that starting to put together some of these resources that we have on campus and finding ways to meet you where you're at on kind of your OER path. Does it mean this semester you just would like some more basic information about what OER is, some of that research that James alluded to? Are you ready to say, okay, but I teach in this area. What's actually out there? How do I find these OERs that other people have already made? Because that's kind of the magical thing in the land of OER is everybody shares everything. And so people are creating all these fabulous things and then they're just sharing them back to the OER community. And so how do we find those things that somebody else has already made that I can now use as a template and a starting point that I can start to build from there instead of starting from scratch? Or you found some things. Now, how do I put a course together that goes with that? And so we want to offer some opportunities for help kind of at any of those different levels. So we'll hit a little more of that at the end of what would be helpful for you over this next semester. Are you at just that starting point? Are you ready to dive in but not sure where to dive? Or did you dive in and now you're a little bit lost because you're just surrounded by free textbooks and you're not quite sure what to do with all of them from there? So we will make sure that there is professional development around the area of OER, even if no one else does.
You asked for questions or comments, and you had your hand up before I did, so.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, okay, because I've got 3 or 4 of them. I didn't want to log the show, but I'm not an instructor, I'm a tutor. So I see some of the effects of students dealing with other old textbooks or not getting them more. Wanting to check out the one in the library, and somebody else already has, and oh, I need to study it tonight, but I can't take it home, and things that I see some of that. Not nearly as much, I'm sure, as the instructors or even the librarians do. But a couple of things to point out that I think might be useful in terms of just getting, what kind of information do you want to get out to instructors and to students. Since I'm past 65, all my courses are free, so I take one every semester. So I'm a student as well. And I've discovered that I need a few days before the semester, every semester rather, to email my instructor and ask him, are you really going to use this book or not? Because I found out the hard way by buying one or renting one, whatever it was, a couple of years ago, where they didn't. I said, well, what's the point? Why did I bother with this? So if that kind of information can be made available on the bookstore's website, because so often it says required, and the professor never touches it. I don't know whose communication that, where that problem lies in communication, but it's a real, it is a real issue.
We agree.
Related to that, some of these materials can be checked out of the public library. I've done that before. A history course I took a couple of years ago, one of the books we used, East Peoria Library, checked it out for however long they would let me keep it. I apparently was the only one who was old enough to use a book in a library anymore as opposed to the other students, but hey, did the job for me. I had it, I renewed it a couple times, nobody else wanted it, so it was fine. But people should be made aware that that is a possibility. In the public library system, as I'm sure you know around here, we're part of a network that is basically statewide, and you can get things from just about anywhere, and you can get just about anything that's ever been published. Might take you a little bit, but you can get them. So just get that information out there to people, whether it's on the library, bookstore's website, or whatever.
I mean, definitely information is power, but that to me just sounds like such a barrier, right? To have to go to a public library to request through whatever loan program. So I
You
think
can do
the
that
goal,
online.
yeah, but I think that one of the benefits of moving in an open and OER kind of perspective is to eliminate some of those things. So we're not giving a student a whole extra afternoon worth of searching for your textbook. You know, I mean, so that's kind of where
Another
we're
hour on the bus.
right, to the library. So it's really the beauty of OER is that it identifies that student need. It really, and it can eliminate anyway some of those barriers.
Textbook requisition is definitely one that is on our to-do list, and so one of the things as we have started looking at OER from a more college-wide standpoint. So like if OER is happening here at ICC already, there's a number of instructors that just kind of on their own are adopting these things. But a lot of the things that are not currently in place are some college-wide process things. And so textbook requisition is something that happens every semester for every section. And that form has not been updated recently, and so it doesn't really reflect the option for teachers to be using, especially these open materials. Because that's not clear in the textbook requisition process, it's hard for us to even, we're having trouble creating a list of what classes are currently using OER materials, just because there isn't a way for us to document that on the front end to even know what's happening later. Because one of the things we want to do, we have this research about the benefits of OER on the national level and what other schools have done. We want to know what's it doing here at ICC. So for these sections that are already using that, how is that helping those students? How do the DFW rates in those sections compare to some of our overall averages? And right now we don't have a lot of ways to track that, just because we need to update some of our kind of back-end processes to match what's happening. And so individual instructors have jumped on, but there's not a way for some of these things at the college level to start showing what those larger benefits are.
I have kind of a beginner's innocent naive question.
Love it.
I wondered, I was just at the copyright workshop and got completely terrified by the end of it. And I was wondering, I'm assuming this committee of people would identify the sources so that we don't have to worry about all of that?
So on the bookmark that we handed out, there's a web address on the back, and it's a library. It's like a library page. We call them LibGuides. ICC Library has created a place that has links to all sorts of reputable OER collections or open collections. It has information about Creative Commons licensing. It has information about how to create your own, how to work with images and videos. So it's kind of like your one-stop shop. We've looked at it, the ICC Library, we've curated these resources, and so we kind of can vouch for you there. The good news is that it can seem scary. You don't want to be in violation of copyright, and you want to use information ethically and legally. We all want that. But Creative Commons licensing allows you to do some creative things, to have ownership of the material that you're teaching, but to change it and adapt it in a way that's going to work for your class. It's one of the beauties. That's why I love Creative Commons licensing. And anything you create, you can put your own Creative Commons license on it, so that others can benefit from what you created. So I think at ATD they were saying, like, you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's a shared community. So you don't have to put together a resource if there's one already out there that works for you. But the beauty of OER is you can create what's missing and then share it out back into the environment. So it's very much a circle. So it encourages you to create what you need, but then to give back to your fellow educators and people in your discipline, because we're all serving students, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about the students that matter, and whatever tools or platform that gives you the most flexibility to give your students what you need, you know, that's as a library, as an institution, that's what we're here to support. And I think there's one more slide about some of the research. Oh, and so when we were creating the vision, we wanted to align what we would like to see happen with OER, with the ICC strategic plan, and we were able to do that in two ways. I'll let James talk more about that.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier about the completion rates, you know, having that textbook that first day, not having to wait for Amazon to ship it or to see if the teacher is actually going to use it. The research is very clear on all of this. Obviously, textbook costs are embedded into the cost of going to college. Financial aid doesn't always cover this. If you don't get the right grants, you don't get the right. And so what's interesting is that New York City had a huge grant on this, and one of the things that they discovered was that students actually took more credit hours with their Z degree, and that's because they didn't have to fork over $1,500 in textbooks for the year. So the college benefits from that. They benefited because they were able to get to their degree or their certificate faster and you know a more
Increase like certificate completion, completion rates, you know?
Yeah. In terms of sort of an indirect benefit, one of the things that the research showed is that students didn't have to work instead of 30 or 40 hours, they could maybe work 25 hours, you know, cut some hours because they didn't have to buy those textbooks, which means that then they're going to be theoretically studying your class, right, material more. As I mentioned earlier, the DFW rate, and it was pretty dramatic too. GPAs went up, right? Now some of these studies are smaller, right? So it's a booming research area though. In the last few years, there's just tons of these studies. Some kind of meta studies are looking at all the smaller studies to see, but the data at this point is showing GPA going up. Part of this is because of the open pedagogy and more interesting, more customized material. So instead of having sort of generic examples, you could have Peoria examples or Pekin examples or whatever, and so the students are more interested and engaged, perhaps. Obviously, at-risk students are you know, a clear target audience for this, and it also aligns with our strategic plan in terms of equity too, particularly those marginalized groups. In terms of enhancing the student-focused culture to increase student engagement, student satisfaction. You're not paying money, your satisfaction tends to go up, right? Obviously, we all know about the multi-trillion-dollar student debt issue. This helps our students not have that burden as they pursue their careers and their lives. This is an interesting one. Student perception of class quality. Now, I don't know quite how this works, but the data was showing that students who had OER classes found overall that they preferred those classes, not just in terms of the cost, but in terms of the quality. And that may be because of open pedagogy, right? Which leads into this, student participation. Who was it? I think someone was talking about people sharing books. Who was that? Somebody in here was talking about, you know, you got the book and then I'll have the book and so forth. If everybody's got the book, they can all read it and they can all participate in the class. In terms of student agency, is somewhat what Jessica and I were talking about and Megan were talking about in terms of having those assignments where they really care about the assignments, where it's really, you know, focused on what they can do and showing that to the public, not just to the one person who's going to grade them, right? Megan talked a lot about customizing the content. This is an interesting one, taking notes. We say, okay, well, I've got a book, right? I can take notes on the book, or I can take notes on my computer, so forth. How about taking notes right on the book and being able to search for those things? You know, I don't know about you, but I've taken notes on books and then tried to find that note. back and forth. Well, search, and there you've got it. So interesting in terms of study habits and preparation for tests and so forth like that. Data suggests also helping with multiple learning styles because it's not just about textbooks. Mary, you were talking about different types of materials. We've seen that it doesn't have to be just a book kind of substitute. And then efficiency relevance.
Yeah, Kristen's class is a good example of that because you have that whole module that's environmental science focused, that's open. You're using an open textbook, you're using library materials, videos, just all sorts of
Journal articles,
websites. I mean,
Yeah.
The research that backs those alignments is on the LibGuide.
which I can show. So this is what that page looks like. That's the link is on the back of that bookmark. So this guide there's a lot on here, but it's designed to really, again, help you where you're at. So everything from the basics, what is an OER, why should I use an OER? This tab right here is just going to link you, it's going to explain what an open textbook is. And then over here on the right, it has links to all of these reputable kind of quality open textbook collections. So the Open Textbook Network is a popular one. OpenStax is a really popular one. Kristen's environmental biology is in OpenStax. Mary is yours.
My intro to site.
Oh, yeah,
I
OpenStax.
don't, yeah.
There's,
I have others in my discipline I have to piece.
Sure,
Or
yeah.
at least intro to site.
Okay.
Yeah, it's open,
It's OpenStax. And so these collections are sort of filling that space. So in my little OER bubble, you know, the Open Textbook Library is funded by the Open Textbook Network. OTN has sort of become a vendor, if you will, of these collections, and they're committed, you know, they house them on their servers, and they're committed to providing these materials forever, basically, you know, and then you can download them yourself. Here's a search box down here that you could search your discipline. So again, a lot to look at, a lot to check out, but then I encourage you to also think beyond textbooks. So OER means more than just textbooks. So here's, on this link, it's going to have, this OER Commons is excellent. It's a great place to find lesson plans and test banks and PowerPoints and pretty much everything you need, videos, and there's so much out there.
I've been using Merlot for years and years and years and years and years before even this whole thing. So I mean, it's like perfect.
Right.
There's so much stuff there.
Well, at ATD we had this really interesting speaker, and she made the point that teachers have always shared materials.
Right.
It's a very teacher-centered activity. What worksheet are you using? Can I adopt it? I mean, this stuff is not new. It's a core fundamental part of good teaching, and it always has been. The technology's new, the online environment's new, and we can do more. And so that's kind of, I think, what's kind of pushing this bloom. But at the core, the activity that we're engaging in is really just kind of fundamental to what teachers do, right? So on this tab, Adapting and Evaluating OER, there are rubrics, criteria, how do you evaluate an OER, and you very much should evaluate an OER. You should evaluate your publisher textbooks, and these rubrics, right, and the same way, I mean, I'm a librarian, I'm going to tell you, evaluate any piece of information that's in front of you at all times, you know, over and over and over again. That's what we do as thinking people, right? So I tell students, like, just always get in that habit. But here are some tools and rubrics that are being used to really apply our rigorous standards in higher ed to these materials that are now out there, openly licensed and free to use. So again, here's information on Creative Commons licensing so that we know what the difference between copyright and Creative Commons is, and kind of how to navigate that landscape. Here's a whole big tab on open pedagogy, open images, audios, and videos, because that can be a little bit different and tricky. I have a Create tab here that has all sorts of resources for getting started with OER, for creating your own materials. This impact research tab is, actually James put a lot of this research together. And so in these different boxes, you're gonna find, so this one here is like general resources, there's discipline specific. So I know that in some disciplines, this seems very adaptable, and others, it just seems like it probably isn't gonna work. And there are plenty of, that might be the case. But there's new emerging research on OER effectiveness in programs like nursing, some very kind of CTE specific environments. And so I guess we'll talk a little bit about our challenge, but really to be thinking about how you can incorporate OER even in disciplines that maybe seem at first glance not applicable.
And one of the things about the research too, we're sort of tied in this utopian vision, obviously, and those people who have done it can tell you it's not utopia yet. We'll get there.
Yeah.
But they do talk a lot about challenges. So, for example, there's one in there about nursing, and there is the good and the bad and the ugly and so forth. But
I didn't have an easily found book. I did not have an OpenStax book. We had to look and look to find a book, and it's not ideal. So I've had to supplement, like Megan's like, yeah, we've got this great book, and I just get to modify it, and math had a great thing. And even if I did anatomy, it'd be great. But my book is kind of so I've had to do a lot of supplementing and adding a lot of other things. The good part is I already do a lot of supplementing, and I wasn't using the book all that heavily, so it suits my kind of teaching anyway. But I just looked again, there's not a whole lot out there still as far as texts go, so.
So since we're right at 4:15, we want to leave you with just a couple of thoughts. So thing number one, if you didn't stop by our table before, we have a sign-in sheet up here separate from that one. If you would like to be kind of in the loop on OER things happening on campus. So sharing out kind of best practice ideas, what's happening here on campus as people try some new things. When we have some of these professional development opportunities, this will be kind of a starting point mailing list of people that want to hear more. But our challenge is, okay, you should not adopt an OER text for this fall if you haven't already done that. And that is not our challenge for today. But maybe start to think about, is there one assignment that you could do where you use some kind of open resource, so something new to bring in? Could you find a resource that you could use in the spring, or that you could talk to your department about for adopting for next fall? And so our goal is to do something this fall. It doesn't mean that we start everything over for Monday because it's Wednesday, and you should go with your plan at this point. Because that's celebration of learning. They're always giving all these great ideas. It's like, but classes start on Monday. So that is not our challenge, but we want you to try something using some kind of open resource that maybe you haven't used before. So maybe it's just finding one that you'll use in the future, trying out one activity that you use with that. And if you do that, we want to hear about it, and so we'll share it out with some videos. So my email address and Jessica's email address are over on the sideboard.
And then maybe even not focused on a resource, but if you have an open, like an open pedagogy assignment, if you're having your students do something on a blog or on social media, or if you have a kind of collaborative project, we would want to hear about that too.
So just, what are you doing to kind of break out of that traditional textbook box? Share it out, and then we'll be sharing it with this list. So let us know what you're doing. Put your name down on this list if you haven't. And if you want to hang around and ask any other questions, we want to let you guys get out of here because you've been here forever. But if you've got questions, feel free to hang around. We love to talk about OER. We get excited.